whether there are trees in it or not. Be bold, and bring some of the fruit of the land. And the narrator comes in and just tells you, no, it's the season of first ripe grapes. Right? So grapes are just starting to put out. So they went up and they spied out the land of the wilderness of Sin to Rehob, near Lebo Hamath. No idea where that is. It's not really important, I guess. They went up into the Negev and they came to Hebron. Oh, you do know where that is. And Ahiman, Sheshai, and Talmon, the Anakites were there. And then somebody has come in and put some. Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. Who cares? It's almost as if they wrote a note and it fell into the spot right there. But anyway, they came to the Wadi Eshkol, and they cut down from there a branch with a single cluster of grapes, and they carried it on a pole between two of them. When I was a little kid, I had a children's Bible that had pictures in it, obviously children's Bibles. And there was a picture of this, and I remember it so clearly because you see the two guys with a pole between them, and there's a cluster of grapes, and the grapes are like the size of basketballs. I mean, they're huge. There's maybe a dozen grapes on this thing, but they're huge. It's not the picture. It's not that they're carrying it between them because the grapes are so huge. They're carrying it between them because the cluster itself, the grapes are normal size. But there's 18,000 grapes in a single cluster, right? So it's these huge clusters of grapes that are normal sized grapes. But they're just so huge because the land is so fertile. Again, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful thing. Oh, and also the word Eshkol in Hebrew means cluster. And so obviously when they come to the Eshkol Valley, they cut down a cluster. Obviously that's what they're cutting down. They also brought some pomegranates and figs. And that place was called Wadi Eshkol because of the cluster that the Israelites cut down from there. At the end of 40 days, they returned from spying out the land. And they came to Moses and Aaron, to all the congregation of the Israelites in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. See, I read this before. And they brought back word to them and to all the congregation, and they showed them the fruit of the land. And they said to them, we came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Again, milk and honey is like an idiom, and it means it's very fertile, right? And yet, the people who live in the land are strong, and the towns are fortified, and they're very large. Besides that, we saw the descendants of Anak there. Anak is a guy that lived a long time ago, before the flood. Before the flood. And we saw his descendants there. And he wasn't a stowaway on the ark, right? Again, it's a clear lie, or again, they're casting it in a really bad way. The Amalekites also live in the land. Oh, do you remember we talked about the Amalekites before? Amalekites, they're Nazis, right? Whenever you hear the word Amalekite in anywhere, it has such a heavy, again, these are the most cruel, horrible people in the whole world. So the Amalekites live in the land of the Negev, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites live in the hill country, and also the Canaanites live by the sea and along the Jordan. Oh, Lord. Oh well. But Caleb quieted the people before Moses, and he said, no. We can go up at once and occupy it. We're able to overcome it. And then the men who had gone up with him said, no, we're not. We're not able to go up against his people. They're stronger than we are. And so they brought to the Israelites an unfavorable report of the land that they had spied out, saying, the land that we have gone through as spies is a land that, in fact, devours its inhabitants. It's like there are huge mouths in the ground. Anyway, and all the people there we saw are huge. And we also saw the Nephilim. You remember the Nephilim? That's in before the flood. That's a long time ago in Genesis 6. We also saw the Nephilim there. And now the Anakites come from the Nephilim. And to ourselves we look like grasshoppers, and that's what we look like to them. Bad report. Not very encouraging. And then all the congregation raised a loud cry, and the people wept. And all the Israelites complained. Of course they did, because that's all they've been doing for the past 2 chapters. Ever since they left Sinai, they love to complain. Just like they did over in Exodus. Remember in Exodus chapter 15, all the way through about 18 or so? They love to complain. The funny thing is, over in Exodus, when they complain, God just takes care of them. God provides them with water. God provides them with manna. God provides them with water from a rock. God provides them with protection from the Amalekites. Remember, Moses raises his hands all day long, right? When they leave Sinai, they like to complain. And they don't like to complain because they don't have anything. They like to complain because they don't like what they have. God doesn't like that very well. And so things don't go so well with the murmuring stories, the complaining stories in Numbers. And that's where he's going to be here. The Israelites complained against Moses and Aaron. The whole congregation said to them, I wish we had died in the land of Egypt. I wish we had died even in the wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us into this land so that we could fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones are going to become booty. That's one of my favorite verses in the whole. Our wives and our little ones are going to become booty. Would it have not been better for us to go back to Egypt just like we said before? And so they said to one another, let's choose a capital. Let's go back to Egypt. Right? And then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the Israelites, and Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land. They tore their clothes, and they said to all the congregation of the Israelites, no, 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 no. The land that we went through with spies is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord is pleased with us, he's going to bring us into that land. He's going to give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. But don't rebel against the Lord. And don't fear the people of the land, because they're no more than bread for us. Their protection is removed from them. The Lord is with us, so don't be afraid of them. But the whole congregation threatened to stone them. How many people were being ordained? Finding everything? Yeah, so, yeah. Good luck. Then the glory of the Lord, Daddy shows up, right? Then the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting and before all the Israelites. And the Lord said to Moses, that's not in there, but that's what I imagine. How long is this people going to despise me? How long are they going to refuse to believe in me in spite of all the signs that I've done among them? I'm going to strike them with pestilence. I'm going to disinherit them. I'm going to make you a nation. I'm going to make of you a nation greater than they. So that's what he says to Moses, right? Moses says, no. Just like if you happen to do the golden calf scene. Again, it's sort of a trope. It's a common thing, and that is God gets angry at the people, turns to Moses and says, I'm going to make a nation of you. You're going to be a new Abraham. And Moses says, whoa. Nope. You have a covenant. You got to remember the covenant. And that's what happens here. Moses said to the Lord, no. Then the Egyptians are going to hear of it. Because in your might you brought this people up from among them, and they're going to tell the inhabitants of the land. And they have heard that you, O Lord, are in the midst of this people, because you, O Lord, are seen face to face, and your cloud stands over them, and you go before them, and a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. And now, if you kill this people all at one time, if you're going to do it a little slowly. Because if you do it all at one time, then the nations who have heard about you are going to say, it's because the Lord wasn't able to bring this people into the land that he swore to give them, that he slaughtered them there in the wilderness. So now, therefore, let the power of the Lord be great in the way that you promised when you spoke, saying, and then he quotes God's own words back to him, the Lord is slow to anger, the Lord is abounding in steadfast love, forgiving iniquity and transgression, but he doesn't clear the guilty. Right, we don't like that last line, but anyway, right, forgiving iniquity and transgression, he doesn't clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the parents upon the children, even to the third and the fourth generation. We saw that a long time ago in the first, I think it's in the second, actually, commandment. So forgive the iniquity of this people according to the greatness of your steadfast love, just as you've pardoned this people from Egypt even to now. And the Lord said, okay, I do forgive, just as you've asked. And they're all going to die. And that's what he says, actually. It's a funny thing, isn't it? Because we think, and again, I don't know what to do with it. Something you might think about. I think it's something really important to think about. So God says, I do forgive. and yet they still die. It seems to me that we think of grace as forgiveness, as meaning that, in a sense, our actions don't matter. It doesn't really matter what we do, which is a really crass way of putting it, but I really do believe that that's what we often think about God's grace or God's forgiveness. It doesn't really matter what we do, God will just forgive. And God does forgive. But there's something about God's forgiveness, and I think that this is very deep and very theological. There's something about God's forgiveness that because of that forgiveness, it makes our actions absolutely vital to the way in which God is working in the world. It doesn't negate our actions. It doesn't say our actions are worthless. It somehow infuses those actions with weight and importance, so that the way that we actually live, remember a long time ago, Abraham? He never showed righteousness, and therefore nothing ever came of that. God doesn't just kill him, God doesn't just get rid of him. God forgives him, God continues the covenant, and yet, I don't know if you've noticed this or not, all the families of the earth are not blessed. And so God says, I will forgive them, and yet they're all going to die. This is what happens. Not all at once, but slowly, over 40 years. And they finally wind up right here on the plains of Moab. And what I want to do is I want to jump to the end of the book. I think I want to jump to the end of the book. No, I don't want to jump to the end of the book. I just want to jump to Deuteronomy. So they wind up here, at the very end. That's where they will wind up. And we're getting ready to cross over into the land. Cross over the Jordan, right over the land. And it's almost as if the people come, and they get right to the edge of the Jordan. And they're right there, and they're ready to step into the Jordan to cross the river, and God, Moses says, I have a few things to say. Deuteronomy. So, Deuteronomy is set up as one incredibly long speech by Moses. All the people are standing on one foot, getting ready to cross over the river into the land. So let's take a look at Deuteronomy. I love Genesis. I really do. I love the stories. I love going through it. I've gone through it for the past 2 years in great detail with my Sunday school class at my church. I love Genesis. I really love Exodus. I love the way in which Pharaoh is portrayed. I even love those plague stories. I love the way in which the plot develops, the way in which Pharaoh becomes more and more hard-headed, both by his own and by God's interaction. I actually find the covenant code to be really interesting as well. And the tabernacle is really an interesting sort of setup. Leviticus. Yeah, I love Leviticus. I love the way in which the basic meaning of Leviticus is that practically everything we see is good and right and perfect, and all things should conform to the purpose for which they were made. I believe that. I believe that deeply. Because when God makes something, it's good. Numbers? I care less for them. Except for the story we just read. I love that story. But Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is by far my favorite book. Almost, if you ask me, what's your favorite book of the Bible? I like saying no. But if you really held a gun to my head and you said, no, you really have to choose just one. If there could only be one book, you tear out everything else in the Bible. Okay, maybe Gospel of Matthew. But everything else in the Bible, well, let's say everything else in the Old Testament, and you only have one book. You're going to a deserted island, and you can't take the New Testament, and you can only take one book from the Old Testament. Which book are you going to take? I take Deuteronomy. There's no question. And the reason why is because the way in which Deuteronomy sees things, again, we talked about the way in which Leviticus sees things. Deuteronomy is it's kind of like Monty Python. And now for something completely different. Right? The way in which Deuteronomy sees things is consistently the way in which Jesus will see things, the way in which Paul will see things. In fact, the way in which Deuteronomy interprets Scripture itself is perhaps the most thoroughgoing Christian way, Christian document that's not in the New Testament. It is in fact no surprise whatsoever that whenever the lawyer asks Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? He goes directly to Deuteronomy 6. There's no, of course, love the Lord your God, which it seems to me is pretty Christian, which is the same way of saying very Deuteronomic, right? Deuteronomy, and it's, you can actually tell from the syllabus that I think this book is really important. Because even though we spend 12 minutes on Numbers, we spend 2 whole sessions on Deuteronomy. So let's take a look at the very beginning of it. Oh, let's talk about this, the outline first, because this is important. Here's the outline of Deuteronomy. Every outline that I have given you so far, you read this way. You know what I'm talking about? So things up here are first, and things here, and then, so it's sort of, yeah.
Did you just pass that earlier?
I did pass that out. And there is another one.
Me too.
Need 2? Take 2, they're small. There you go. You're very welcome. So every outline that I have given y'all so far, you basically read down. You know what I'm talking about? It's basically a down. This one is an interesting outline because you read it not only down, you also read it across. Because the thing with Deuteronomy is that what we've seen so far, again, if you've read Collins, or you know that there are different traditions, JEDP type of stuff, right? And those things get intermeshed, and sometimes they even get worked, even in the same story, they sort of get intermeshed with each other. The thing with Deuteronomy is that you can actually take a look at Deuteronomy, read it carefully all the way through, and you can actually tell that this book has been developed not in sort of an intermeshing way. This book has been developed in big blocks. That is, it started with a certain block, and then another block was added to it, and then another block was added to that, and then another block, and then a couple more blocks. It's not edited, it's not micromanaged, it's macromanaged, right? So it's edited in that way. And so you read it not only this way, that's the normal way, but you also read it this way. And that is that if you take a look at chapters 12, 1 through 26, 19, right, which is the furthest over here, that's the original law code of Deuteronomy. This is probably the oldest part of Deuteronomy. And again, if you take a look at, and again, don't do it, but if you take a look at chapter 12, verse 1, it's almost as if it's the beginning of a book, which it actually was at one time, the beginning of the book of Deuteronomy. And it's a central law code, and those laws look very similar, and you can just see it right here in those laws look very similar to the covenant code that we looked at class before last when we dealt with Exodus. So it seems as though this central law code is somehow related to that covenant code. It's very different. There's different. The laws appear differently in Deuteronomy. We'll see that next class. The laws look differently, but they talk about very similar types of things. The next thing that gets added on the front of that block of central law code is chapters 4, 44 through 1132. And that is in front of that law code, just like with the covenant code. If you remember in Exodus, right, what appears on the very beginning of the covenant code? Well, it's exactly the 10 Commandments, right? So we have the 10 Commandments and then we have the covenant code. It's almost as if we have the covenant code and then the 10 Commandments get appended onto the beginning of it. Sort of provide the theoretical basis of it. Does that make sense? Cool. Same thing happens here is that we have the central law code, and then someone has come along and put in quite a bit of material, not just 10 Commandments, but a good deal of material. The 10 Commandments, which look remarkably like the 10 Commandments that we have in Exodus. There's not much of a difference. There's a little bit of difference, but not much of a difference. It's very clearly that they're working with each other. And also there's an extended sermon on that first commandment. You shall have no other gods before me. What does that mean? What does that mean when God says you shall have